We saw in the last section that a structured response allows us to provide memorable and compelling answers to questions. We've also seen that competency-based questions and ability-based questions form the backbone of most interview processes. It's therefore a good idea to have a structure in our armoury that allows us to respond to these questions with ease. And that structure is the STAR structure, and it's particularly well suited to answering competency and ability-based questions. STAR is an acronym, and each letter outlines a section that we talk through in our response. We talk about the situation, the task, the action, and the results. And when we're asked a competency-based question in an interview, in the vast majority of cases, this should be the structure we use to respond to that question. So let's look at these sections in a bit more detail. The first thing we do is we talk through the situation. What was the situation you found yourself in when you had to use the competency you were being asked to demonstrate? Having talked about the situation, we then go on to talk about the task. What was it we were tasked with doing, and why did this allow us to demonstrate the competency that is required? We are required to demonstrate. Now there's a little trick we can use here to add gravitas to our answer, and that is to explain why this situation mattered, or what the stakes were with successfully completing this situation. Did completing this task enable something big to happen, or did it prevent a problem from occurring? And by doing this, we bring a little bit of emotion into our response. When making a decision, and we have to remember that an interview process is a decision-making process, emotion is actually quite an important factor. The human mind balances the emotional feelings of how things made us feel versus the rational evidence we have. So by bringing a bit of emotion into our response, we help the interviewer see why these tasks mattered. And you may actually find that an interviewer has been in a similar situation themselves, and by explaining why the task mattered, they can actually relate to it a little bit better, which helps make it more memorable and more relatable for them. Having talked about the situation and the task, we then go on to talk about the actions. What was it you did in this situation, and how did you use the competency to complete the required task? Having outlined the actions, we then go on to talk about the results. What was the result of the actions? Did you complete the task successfully, and did you resolve the situation? Now, in the vast majority of cases, I'd advocate using an example that has a positive outcome. Positive is, at the end of the day, an emotion, and actually having a positive outcome is another way of adding good emotions into your response. But having said that, situations where the results didn't go the way expected can also result in very interesting interview responses. There's always things that can be done differently when things go wrong, or things we should learn, or things we should consider implementing in the wider organisation as a result of something going wrong. And in certain situations, such examples can provide very compelling interview responses. One tip at this stage is to make sure that you talk in the first person. We often find ourselves working in a team, and when we talk about the work we have done, we often refer to ourselves as part of that team. We did this, our objective was, and so on. But we have to remember that the interviewer is interested in what we have done. And to help them do that, we have to really focus in on the tasks we completed. And by talking in the first person, I had to do this. My responsibility was. We really isolate our tasks and help the interviewer find the evidence they are looking for. As before, let's consider how to use this structure in response to a question with an example. Let's consider the situation where we have an interviewer and a candidate, and the interviewer asks the candidate a very simple competency-based question. Can you talk me through an example of when you have had to communicate effectively? The candidate immediately thinks this is a competency-based question and starts working through the STAR structure in their response. The situation. In my previous role as a project manager, we were tasked with implementing a new software system to enhance team collaboration. First section, situation outlined. Having talked about the situation, they then go on to talk about the task. My responsibility was to communicate the details of the new software, its benefits, and the upcoming changes to the team. Then to add gravitas, the emotion. The effective communication of how to use the new software details was crucial, as without it, we could not collaborate with colleagues effectively. So very succinctly, the candidate has outlined the situation and the tasks, which means they can now go on to talk about the actions. What was it they did in this situation to demonstrate effective communication? I initiated a series of communication channels. First, I organised a team meeting to introduce the software, providing an overview of its features and benefits. To address any concerns, I also set up one-to-one sessions with team members who needed more personalised assistance. Additionally, I created an email communication plan outlining any milestones, training sessions and support resources. So in talking through the actions, they've clearly used the first person and they've clearly outlined what they did to communicate effectively in this situation. Having talked about the actions, they can then go on to talk about the results. The team responded positively to the clear communication strategy. The initial scepticism was minimised as team members felt more informed and engaged in the process. The implementation went smoothly and the team adapted to the new software seamlessly. The effective communication helped in building trust and minimising resistance, contributing to the overall success of the project. So very succinctly and very clearly, the candidate has outlined a response to the interviewer's question. As we mentioned before, it's unlikely that the initial response, even though this was a very good detailed response, is unlikely to answer all of the interviewer's questions, or there may be things that the interviewer wants to understand in a bit more detail. And this is where the interviewer will then ask follow-up questions. How did you do this? Or what was it you did in this situation to achieve this part of your action or this part of your outcome? And follow-up questions are to be expected after a STAR response. So let's just work through what we've actually seen here in terms of an interview response. First of all, we've answered the question. We've clearly given an example of effective communication and how we've used it, or how the candidate used it. We've seen structure used in the response, the STAR structure, and we've seen how this easily allows a candidate to communicate quite a complex situation effectively in a way that the interviewer can comprehend and understand. We've seen how adding why the task mattered adds gravitas to the answer, and it adds a little bit of interest into what it is the candidate is talking about. We've seen a clear indication of the actions the candidate took because they were talking in the first person, and we could clearly isolate their tasks and their actions. And we've seen a positive outcome for the situation and a positive outcome resulting from effective communication. All of this then sets the candidate up for further follow-up questions by the interviewer. So what are the key points to take away from this? Well, the STAR structure is the best structure to use for answering competency and ability-based questions. You first of all talk about the situation, the tasks, the actions you took, and then the results. And also, if you are using this structure, expect follow-up questions. Having grabbed an interviewer's attention with a well-structured response, it's likely they'll want to know more. And follow-up questions normally take the form of a interviewer's question. How, why, when, what did you do? These are follow-up questions that you can normally think about in advance, and it is advisable to be prepared for these in advance of the interview.